The red dust swirled across the prefabricated housing unit's viewport, obscuring what little view there was of New Horizon Colony's eastern quadrant. Brock Callahan wiped condensation from the inside of the reinforced glass, squinting as another gust of Jovian wind howled around the corners of his modest home. The atmospheric stabilizers were failing again, their wheezing protest audible even over the storm. Another repair he couldn't afford. "Dad, is the air system broken again?" Lucas appeared in the doorway of his small bedroom, clutching his tablet to his chest. At 9 years old, he was already too familiar with the constant battle against New Horizons' harsh environment. "Just needs a little coaxing," Brock replied, forcing a smile as he moved to the maintenance panel. "Nothing your old man can't handle." As his weathered hands deftly manipulated the control interface, Brock caught his reflection in the polished metal surface. 37 years old, but the lines etching his face suggested a decade more. 5 years on Jupiter's largest settlement had aged him. That, and losing Sarah to the colony's first major pressure breach. Being a single father on the frontier hadn't been part of the plan. The stabilizer coughed, sputtered, then reluctantly hummed back to life. Temporary fix, like everything else in their lives. "See, all better." Brock ruffled Lucas's sandy hair. "How's the homework coming?" "Almost done. Teacher says I'm the best in class at orbital mechanics." Pride shone in the boy's eyes, Sarah's eyes. That's my boy. Smart like your mother." The words caught in Brock's throat, but he pushed through. "Finish up, then we'll have dinner. I've got a supply run to make after, but I'll be back before bedtime." As Lucas returned to his studies, Brock checked his delivery manifest. One more shipment to the agricultural dome, then home. The pay was miserable, but at least it was steady, steadier than his previous career as a heavy equipment technician for Earth Defense Force. 15 years of service. And what did he have to show for it? An honorable discharge when the Jupiter colonies were demilitarized, a handful of commendations gathering dust, and skills deemed insufficiently academic by New Horizons administration. The colony wanted engineers with degrees, not field technicians with combat experience, no matter how many EDF walkers, dropships, or orbital platforms he'd kept operational during the Saturnian conflict. Here, he was just another undereducated veteran, useful enough for deliveries, not qualified enough for the technical teams that kept the colony functioning. He loaded the final crates onto his transport sled and gave Lucas instructions to lock up tight until he returned. The boy nodded solemnly, already accustomed to being responsible beyond his years. "I've got my emergency beacon," Lucas said, patting his pocket. "And I know the shelter protocols." "Oh, that's right." Brock checked the atmospheric readouts one more time. "Should be clear weather in an hour. I'll be back before the secondary dust front." The delivery route took him along the outskirts of the colony, where the massive terraforming equipment constantly fought against Jupiter's hostile conditions. Red dust coated everything, working its way into seals and circuits despite their best efforts. It was on this lonely stretch of makeshift road, halfway to the agricultural dome, that Brock noticed something unusual silhouetted against the crimson landscape. At first, he thought it might be debris from the orbital platforms. It wouldn't be the first time something had fallen through Jupiter's turbulent atmosphere. But as he approached, the distinct contours of a ship emerged from the swirling dust. Not human-made, certainly not Earth Defense Force or commercial design. Brock slowed the transport sled, caution battling curiosity. After the peace accords, several non-terrestrial species had established diplomatic relations with the colonies, but direct contact remained rare, especially this far out. The craft was roughly 20 meters long, with an organic, almost fluid design that defied conventional aerospace engineering. Its surface gleamed with an iridescent sheen, despite the dust coating parts of its hull. And it was clearly damaged. One section vented a pale blue vapor, while another appeared partially collapsed. Protocol dictated immediate notification of colony security. Unauthorized landings were serious business, especially non-terrestrial craft. But something made Brock hesitate as he reached for his communicator. Through a translucent section of the ship's hull, he could see movement, a lone figure, seemingly struggling with internal systems. "Hell," Brock muttered, securing his transport sled and grabbing his toolkit. Protocol be damned, someone needed help. As he approached, a panel in the ship's side retracted, revealing what Brock assumed was the entrance. The interior lights flickered erratically, illuminating a cramped cockpit filled with unfamiliar technology. The occupant turned, a tall, slender being with silvery blue skin and large, multifaceted eyes that reflected Brock's image back at him like dozens of tiny mirrors. They regarded each other in silence for a long moment before the alien made a series of clicking sounds followed by a warbling tone. A translator device on its forearm glowed, then produced halting English. "System, failure, assistance, required." Brock had encountered non-terrestrials during his EDF service, but never this species. The being's posture suggested distress, though it was difficult to read alien body language. "I'm Brock Callahan," he said, gesturing to himself. "I can help. I'm a technician." He pointed to the damaged sections of the ship. "May I?" The alien seemed to consider this, then moved aside, allowing Brock access to the ship's systems. Up close, the technology was even more alien than he'd expected. Organic components interwoven with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. But underneath the exotic design, Brock recognized familiar principles: power distribution networks, propulsion systems, environmental controls. "Let's see what we've got here," he murmured, more to himself than his silent observer. The first hour passed in methodical examination. The ship had suffered damage from Jupiter's intense radiation belts, a common problem even for human vessels with proper shielding. The alien craft utilized different protective measures, but the principle was similar. The secondary issue was more concerning. The propulsion system had ingested Jovian dust particles, causing cascade failures throughout the ship's integrated systems. "Your filtration system isn't calibrated for our atmosphere," Brock explained, though he wasn't sure how much the alien understood. "The particulates are microscopic but highly abrasive. They're damaging your intake manifolds." The alien made a musical sound that might have been acknowledgement. Its translator remained silent. Brock wiped sweat from his brow as Jupiter's harsh sun beat down on the exposed hull where he was working. His delivery would be late now, but he couldn't bring himself to leave the job half-finished. There was something satisfying about working with technology again, even alien technology, that made the heat and discomfort worthwhile. "Need a hand there, Callahan?" a voice called from behind him. Brock turned to see Dalton, his nearest neighbor from the residential sector, pulling up on his patrol sled. The man wore the insignia of colony security, but had never served off-world. He regarded the alien ship with obvious suspicion. "I'm good, thanks," Brock replied, continuing his work. "You know protocol on unregistered landings," Dalton said, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. "Especially non-terrestrial ones. Just helping out a traveler in need. No different than assisting a broken-down transport?" Dalton snorted. "Except this transport isn't human, and neither is its pilot. Command needs to be notified." "I'll file the paperwork when I'm done," Brock said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. Right now, I'm busy. Your funeral. Callahan. Dalton shook his head. Always thought those EDF stories of yours were just hot air. Guess you really did work with the Offworlders. He spat on the ground before returning to his sled. Don't come crying when colony admin slaps you with another fine you can't afford. As Dalton's sled disappeared into the dust, Brock returned to his work with renewed determination. The alien had observed the exchange silently, its faceted eyes unreadable. Don't mind him, Brock said. Some folks out here haven't adjusted to the idea that we're not alone in the universe. The alien's translator crackled. You help without compensation? Brock shrugged. You needed help. I can help. Simple as that. Another 3 hours passed as Brock recalibrated the ship's systems to handle Jupiter's environment. The work was challenging. Connecting his diagnostic tools to alien technology required creative adaptation, but the underlying principles remained consistent. Energy was energy. Propulsion was propulsion, no matter the species that designed it. As the twin shadows of Jupiter's visible moons stretched across the landscape, Brock made the final adjustments to the filtration system. The ship's lights stabilized, and the blue vapor ceased venting from the damaged section. That should do it, he said, closing his toolkit. I've modified your intake filters to handle our atmospheric particulates. The propulsion system is back online, and I've bypassed the damaged sections of your navigation array. He paused, wiping his hands on a rag. It's not perfect, but it'll get you back to wherever you're headed. The alien approached, its movements fluid and graceful despite the confined space. It extended a slender, 6-fingered hand toward Brock, palm upward. In it rested what appeared to be a small data chip, glowing with soft blue light. Compensation, the translator said. Brock shook his head. Not necessary. Consider it interplanetary goodwill. The alien retracted its hand, studying Brock with those multifaceted eyes. Then it made a series of musical tones that the translator didn't attempt to convert. Safe. Journey. The device finally managed before falling silent. Brock stepped back as the ship's entrance panel slid closed. The engines hummed to life, a sound unlike any human propulsion system, more harmonic than mechanical. With surprising grace for its damaged state, the craft rose from the Jovian soil, hovered momentarily, then accelerated upward, disappearing into the dusty atmosphere. Only then did Brock realize how late it had grown. His delivery would have to wait until morning, and Lucas would be worried. He hurried back to his transport sled, casting one last glance at the sky where the alien ship had vanished. The strange encounter left him with an odd feeling, something between accomplishment and unease, like he'd passed some test he hadn't known he was taking. By the time he reached home, the secondary dust front was already rolling in. Lucas sat by the viewport, relief washing over his face as Brock's sled appeared through the swirling red particles. You're late, the boy said, trying to sound stern but unable to hide his concern. Sorry, kiddo. Got caught up in an unexpected repair job. Brock ruffled his son's hair. How about some dinner? As they ate their ration meal, Brock debated whether to tell Lucas about the alien encounter. The boy had a fascination with extraterrestrial species, a passion inherited from Sarah, who had been a xenobiologist before the accident. But Brock decided against it. No need to get the boy's hopes up about something that was likely just a one-time occurrence. Dad? Lucas looked up from his food. Are you in trouble again? I heard your notification panel beeping earlier. Brock sighed. Sure enough, there was a message from Colony Administration, undoubtedly Dalton's report about the unauthorized alien contact. Nothing to worry about, he assured his son. Just some paperwork I need to handle. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Brock sat at their small kitchen table, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee as he reviewed the citation. Another fine he couldn't afford. Another mark against his already questionable standing in the colony. He wondered, not for the first time, whether they wouldn't be better off returning to Earth, overcrowded and resource-depleted as it was. But Earth hadn't been home for a long time. And despite everything, Jupiter offered Lucas opportunities that the dying homeworld couldn't match, if only Brock could find a way to secure their future here. He fell asleep at the table, dreaming of alien ships and endless red dust. The persistent chime of the door alert woke him shortly after dawn. Brock rubbed his neck, stiff from sleeping hunched over, and checked the security feed. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 massive black vehicles, official cruisers of the Interplanetary Diplomatic Alliance, hovered outside his modest prefab home. Each bore the distinctive insignia of the IDA. Earth's star system intertwined with representations of allied non-terrestrial civilizations. These weren't colony security or administrative officials. These were the highest level of interplanetary diplomats, typically seen only in Earth's capital or at major colonial governmental centers, never at the door of a delivery driver in a remote section of New Horizon. "Dad?" Lucas appeared in his bedroom doorway, eyes wide. "Why are there big black ships outside?" "I don't know," Brock answered honestly. "But I'm going to find out. Stay in your room, okay?" Lucas nodded, retreating but leaving his door ajar, just enough to peek through. Brock quickly splashed water on his face and straightened his clothes before approaching the door. No use delaying the inevitable. Whatever trouble he was in for helping the alien visitor, he'd face it head-on. The door slid open to reveal 3 figures, 2 human and 1 decidedly not. The non-human stood nearly 7 feet tall, with the same silvery blue skin as yesterday's visitor, though this individual's features seemed more distinguished, its posture more formal. It wore elaborate robes that shimmered with subtle patterns that seemed to shift and change with the light. Of the humans, one was a stern-faced woman in the distinctive black uniform of IDA security. The other, to Brock's shock, was a face he recognized: Colonel James Whitaker, his former commanding officer from the Earth Defense Force, now wearing the diplomatic attire of an IDA liaison. "Brock Callahan," Whitaker said, a faint smile breaking through his official demeanor. "Still getting yourself into interesting situations, I see." Brock stood speechless, his mind racing to connect yesterday's seemingly minor incident with the overwhelming response at his door. The alien stepped forward, its multifaceted eyes reflecting Brock's confused expression. "Technician Callahan." Its translator spoke, the voice smoother and more natural than the device from yesterday. "I am Ambassador Zenthral of the Kuvari Collective. May we enter your dwelling?" Finding his voice, Brock stepped aside. "Of course, though I'm afraid it's not exactly set up for diplomatic receptions." The ambassador made a musical sound that the translator interpreted as polite amusement. "Accommodations are irrelevant. It is the inhabitant that interests us." The 3 visitors entered the small living space, the ambassador ducking slightly to clear the doorway. Colonel Whitaker's eyes scanned the modest interior, lingering briefly on the worn furniture and patched wall panels. "Still making do with less than you deserve." "Callahan," he commented. The female security officer remained silent, taking up a position near the door. "Would you like some coffee?" Brock offered automatically, falling back on the hospitality his mother had drilled into him. "It's synthetic, but not terrible." "That won't be necessary," Ambassador Zenthral replied. "We come regarding yesterday's encounter with our scout vessel." So it had been a test. Brock's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Look, if this is about the unauthorized contact, I accept full responsibility. No need to involve colony administration. Whitaker chuckled. Always ready to fall on your sword. Callahan, that hasn't changed. He exchanged a look with the ambassador. But you've misunderstood the purpose of our visit. The ambassador produced a small device similar to the data chip offered by the alien scout. It projected a holographic display showing recordings of Brock working on the damaged ship from multiple angles, including perspectives he hadn't noticed. Our scout vessel was indeed damaged, Ambassador Zenthral explained, though not severely enough to prevent its return to our orbital platform. The encounter was an evaluation. An evaluation? Brock repeated, confused. Of your technical capabilities, ethical parameters, and problem-solving methodology. The ambassador continued. One of 17 similar scenarios conducted throughout Earth's colonial territories. Whitaker stepped forward. The Interplanetary Diplomatic Alliance has been working with the Kuvari and other non-terrestrial civilizations to establish specialized interspecies technical teams. The Interspecies Technical Corps, ITC for short. Brock looked between them, still not comprehending. And this has what to do with me? Exactly. The ambassador extended the data chip toward Brock. You were selected for evaluation based on your Earth Defense Force service record. Your performance yesterday confirmed our initial assessment. This contains an invitation to join the first cohort of the Interspecies Technical Corps as a human representative. Brock took the chip hesitantly. I don't understand. I'm just a technician. No degree, no special qualifications. Colony administration doesn't even consider me qualified for their technical teams. Colony administration, Whitaker said with poorly concealed disdain, is not known for its forward-thinking personnel policies. The IDA and our non-terrestrial partners take a more pragmatic approach to talent assessment. You demonstrated several qualities of value. Ambassador Zenthral added, technical adaptability with unfamiliar systems, ethical decision-making prioritizing assistance over protocol, resourcefulness with limited tools, cultural openness toward non-terrestrial entities. The ambassador's eyes shifted, seeming to focus on something beyond Brock. And commitment to familial responsibilities. Brock turned to see Lucas peering around his bedroom doorway, curiosity overwhelming his earlier caution. Lucas, Brock said, come meet our guests. The boy approached slowly, eyes wide as he took in the towering ambassador. Hello, he said quietly, then added with sudden confidence. Are you from the Kuvari Collective in the Proxima Centauri system? Mom's research mentioned your species' bioluminescent communication methods. The ambassador's skin briefly rippled with patterns of light. Your offspring possesses knowledge of our people, the translator conveyed, though the tone suggested surprise. His mother was a xenobiologist, Brock explained. Lucas has inherited her interest in non-terrestrial biology. The ambassador's attention returned to Brock. The invitation extends beyond your technical service. The Interspecies Technical Corps provides comprehensive relocation and educational benefits for dependents. Brock's heart skipped a beat. Educational benefits for Lucas? The boy was brilliant, but New Horizons' educational resources were limited at best. A real opportunity for his son. What exactly would this position entail? He asked, his voice more steady than he felt. Whitaker answered, initial training at the orbital platform above Jupiter, then assignment to one of the interspecies technical teams being deployed throughout the solar system. The work is challenging, adapting and maintaining technology across species boundaries, but the compensation reflects that. The data chip contains complete details. The ambassador added, Review them at your convenience. We require your decision within one planetary rotation. 24 hours, Whitaker clarified. Brock nodded, suddenly overwhelmed. And if I decline? Then you continue your current existence. The ambassador stated simply. No penalty attaches to refusal. Lucas tugged at Brock's sleeve. Dad, he whispered, though not quietly enough. You have to say yes. The adults, human and non-human alike, regarded the boy with varying degrees of amusement. I'll review the information, Brock promised. And you'll have my answer tomorrow. After the visitors departed, the cruisers rising silently into the Jovian sky, Brock sat with Lucas at their small kitchen table. The data chip projected its contents above the scarred surface. Employment terms, training requirements, compensation details, housing arrangements, educational programs. It's everything we've been hoping for. Dad, Lucas said, eyes shining as he scrolled through the educational opportunities. Look, they even have xenobiology courses. Brock watched his son's excitement with a mixture of joy and trepidation. It's a big change. Kiddo, we'd be leaving New Horizon, working with technologies and species we've never encountered. That's what makes it amazing, Lucas countered with the straightforward logic of a 9-year-old. Mom would have loved this. She always said humans need to learn from other species if we're going to survive. Sarah would have loved it. The thought hit Brock with unexpected force. His late wife had dedicated her career to understanding non-terrestrial biology, believing passionately in the potential of interspecies cooperation. Now, here was an opportunity to continue that work in his own way, and to give their son the future she had dreamed of. We'd be starting over, Brock cautioned. Again. Lucas looked around their small, shabby home. This wasn't ever supposed to be permanent, right? You always said we were just getting by until something better came along. He fixed his father with a serious gaze that seemed beyond his years. This is better, Dad. This is what we've been waiting for. Out of the mouths of babes, Brock thought. That night, he couldn't sleep. The decision weighed on him, not because he was uncertain of the answer, but because saying yes felt like stepping off a cliff. The familiar, even in its hardship, had a certain comfort. The unknown, however promising, carried risks. What if he wasn't good enough? What if, once again, he found himself outclassed by those with better education, more prestigious backgrounds? What if he failed and, in doing so, failed Lucas too? Dawn found him still awake, watching the eternal dust storms of Jupiter through the viewport. The decision crystallized not in a moment of certainty, but in the acceptance of uncertainty. He couldn't guarantee success, but staying guaranteed stagnation. For Lucas, and for Sarah's memory, he had to try. When the cruisers returned, Brock was ready. Lucas stood beside him, trying to maintain a serious expression despite his barely contained excitement. Ambassador Zenthral and Colonel Whitaker entered alone this time, the security officer remaining with the vehicles. I accept the position, Brock said without preamble, with one condition. The ambassador's faceted eyes reflected twin images of Brock's determined face. State your condition. Lucas comes with me for all training and assignments, not in separate housing, not in some distant educational facility. Where I go, he goes. Whitaker opened his mouth as if to object, but the ambassador raised a 6-fingered hand. Family cohesion is valued in Kuvari culture. The translator conveyed, your condition is acceptable and will be accommodated. Yeah, then we have an agreement, Brock said, extending his hand. The ambassador mimicked the human gesture, its cool, textured skin strange against Brock's palm. Training begins in 3 planetary days, the ambassador stated. Prepare only essential personal items. All equipment and necessities will be provided. As the visitors departed, Lucas could no longer contain himself. He launched into a victory dance around their small living room, whooping with delight. "We're going to space, Dad! Real space! Not just this dust ball!" Brock laughed, his son's joy infectious. "We're already in space. Technically, Jupiter's hardly Earth." "You know what I mean," Lucas insisted. "We're going to be with aliens and spaceships and cool technology and everything. And you'll be studying hard." Brock reminded him, "This isn't a vacation." But Lucas was already in his room, deciding which precious few possessions would make the journey. Brock watched him go, a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he was moving forward, not just surviving. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparations and farewells, though there were precious few of the latter. New Horizon had never truly become home, and outside of Lucas. Brock had formed few meaningful connections. Even Dalton seemed more confused than displeased by their sudden departure, especially when the IDA cruisers returned to transport them to the orbital platform. Guess those EDF stories weren't exaggerations after all, the security officer admitted grudgingly as Brock and Lucas boarded the sleek vessel. "Good luck out there, Callahan." The orbital platform exceeded even Brock's expectations. A massive structure in Jovian orbit, it served as headquarters for the Interplanetary Diplomatic Alliance's outer system operations. Multiple non-terrestrial species moved through its corridors alongside humans, the architecture itself a blend of design philosophies from a dozen worlds. Their quarters, while compact, were comfortable and well-appointed, a dramatic improvement from their prefab home on the surface. Lucas was immediately enrolled in the platform's educational program, where human children learned alongside the offspring of diplomatic personnel from various species. For Brock, the transition proved more challenging. The technical training was rigorous, combining classroom instruction with hands-on application. Non-terrestrial technologies operated on principles that sometimes contradicted his Earth-centric understanding, requiring him to unlearn habits as much as acquire new knowledge. The human contingent of trainees included former military technicians like himself, civilian specialists, and a handful of academic engineers who regarded the field techs with thinly veiled condescension. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a quantum propulsion theorist from Earth's premier technical university, seemed particularly unimpressed by Brock's practical background. "The Kuvari drive systems operate on principles you can't possibly understand without a foundation in non-Euclidean physics," she informed him during their first practical exercise. "Perhaps you should observe while I handle the calibrations." Brock stepped aside, watching as Dr. Chen's theoretically perfect approach resulted in a cascading system failure. The Kuvari instructor's translator conveyed what might have been amusement. "Theory without application creates imbalance," it said. "Technician Callahan, demonstrate the manual override sequence." Drawing on his experience with the scout vessel, Brock bypassed the failed safety protocols and stabilized the system. Dr. Chen's expression shifted from dismissal to grudging curiosity. "How did you know which subsystem to prioritize?" she asked later. "The theoretical framework suggests the opposite approach." "Experience." Brock replied simply, "Some things you learn by doing, not by studying." As weeks turned to months, such moments accumulated. The theoretical specialists excelled in understanding the why behind non-terrestrial technologies, while the practical technicians like Brock mastered the how. Eventually, they began to learn from each other, forming effective teams that combined both perspectives. Lucas thrived in the educational program, his natural curiosity and his mother's xenobiological background giving him an edge in interspecies communication. He came home each day bursting with new discoveries and friendships with children from worlds Brock had never heard of. Zantral says Kuvari children can perceive ultraviolet light, he reported excitedly one evening. That's why their artwork looks different to them than to us. And guess what? Their teacher is helping me build special goggles so I can see it too. Brock smiled, recognizing Sarah's influence in their son's enthusiasm. Just make sure those goggles are safe for human eyes, okay? 6 months into their new life. Colonel Whitaker approached Brock after a particularly grueling training session on Arcturian environmental systems. "You're exceeding expectations. Callahan," the officer said. "Ambassador Zenthral speaks highly of your progress." Brock wiped sweat from his brow. "The learning curve is steep, but it's the most satisfying work I've done since the EDF. Speaking of satisfaction," Whitaker continued, "there's been a development regarding New Horizon Colony." Brock tensed. Despite everything, he still felt responsible for the struggling settlement. "What kind of development?" "The IDA has established a technical assistance program for frontier colonies, implementing some of the cross-species innovations developed here. New Horizon was selected as the first recipient." "That's unexpected good news," Brock said cautiously. Whitaker smiled. "Not entirely unexpected. Ambassador Zenthral was quite impressed by the conditions you and your son endured there. The program was his initiative. The realization that their hardship had ultimately benefited the entire colony left Brock momentarily speechless. "The first technical team deploys next month," Whitaker added. "They've requested you as a consultant, given your familiarity with the colony's systems." "Me?" Brock couldn't hide his surprise. "I wasn't exactly considered a technical authority there." "Perspectives change," Whitaker said simply. "Sometimes it takes an outside view to recognize value." The return to New Horizon, even temporarily, proved illuminating. In the months since their departure, the colony had begun receiving non-terrestrial technical assistance. The atmospheric stabilizers now functioned at peak efficiency. Dust filtration had improved dramatically, and the agricultural domes produced unprecedented yields. Dalton, now assigned as liaison to the IDA technical team, seemed a different person, his previous suspicion of off-worlders replaced by genuine respect. "Never thought I'd see the day when Kuvari engineers worked alongside our people," he admitted as he escorted Brock through the transformed colony. "But the results speak for themselves." "The Kuvari value practical solutions," Brock replied. "They're less concerned with who provides them than with their effectiveness." Their tour concluded at Brock's former home, now occupied by a young family. The prefab unit had been upgraded with non-terrestrial environmental technology, its interior comfortable despite the dust storm raging outside. "Your recommendation made a difference," Dalton said. "When you identified the critical infrastructure needs, the IDA actually listened. Colony administration never took us that seriously." Brock nodded, feeling a sense of closure. Sometimes it takes leaving a place to help it properly. Upon their return to the orbital platform, Brock found himself assigned to the Interspecies Technical Corps' first official deployment team. The mission: integrate compatible technologies across human and non-terrestrial systems throughout the outer colonies. Lucas would accompany him, his education continuing through a combination of the platform's remote learning program and practical experience. The boy was thrilled at the prospect of visiting multiple colonies and non-terrestrial outposts. "Just like Mom wanted," he said as they packed for departure. "She always said the future depends on species working together." Brock smiled, recognizing the truth in his son's words. and in Sarah's vision. She'd be proud of you, Lucas, of both of us, I think. 1 year after the strange encounter with the damaged alien ship, Brock stood before the Interplanetary Council, representing the human contingent of the Interspecies Technical Corps. Around him stood representatives from 7 non-terrestrial species, each bringing unique perspectives and technologies to their shared mission. The Interspecies Technical Corps has exceeded initial parameters. Ambassador Zenthral reported to the assembled diplomats. 17 colonial installations have received integrated technological upgrades with measurable improvements in efficiency, sustainability, and quality of life indicators. Brock stepped forward when prompted, still somewhat uncomfortable in the formal uniform of the ITC, but standing tall nonetheless. The human perspective, he began, finding his voice, has always been shaped by our limitations. We see problems through the lens of our own capabilities and experiences. He gestured to his non-terrestrial colleagues. What the Corps has taught us is that those limitations are largely self-imposed. When we combine our approaches, practical and theoretical, human and non-human, we find solutions none of us could have discovered alone. From the gallery, Lucas watched with undisguised pride as his father addressed the council. Beside him sat Dr. Chen, whose initial skepticism had evolved into a productive collaboration that bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. The next phase of the program, Brock continued, will expand beyond the Jovian colonies to include settlements throughout the solar system. We've established training centers on Mars, Titan, and Europa, where local technicians, regardless of formal education, can learn to work with integrated technologies. He thought of New Horizon, transformed from a struggling outpost to a model of interspecies cooperation, of his own transformation from a delivery driver barely making ends meet to a respected technical specialist, of Lucas, thriving in an environment that celebrated his curiosity and honored his mother's legacy. A year ago, I was just a technician trying to help a stranded traveler. Brock concluded. I didn't know I was being evaluated, didn't know my actions would lead to this moment. I simply did what seemed right, used the skills I had to solve the problem in front of me. He smiled, meeting Ambassador Zenthral's multifaceted gaze. Perhaps that's the most important lesson the Corps has to teach, that the simplest actions, done with integrity and skill, can open doors we never imagined existed. As the council chamber erupted in the various sounds of approval from multiple species, Brock felt a profound sense of having found his place in the universe, not despite his practical background and lack of formal credentials, but because of them. The skills that New Horizon had dismissed had proven valuable beyond Earth's narrow definitions of success. Later, as he and Lucas prepared for their next assignment, a 6-month deployment to the Saturn system, Brock found himself reflecting on the strange path that had led them here. "Dad?" Lucas interrupted his thoughts. "Do you think that alien ship was really damaged? Or was it all just a test?" Brock considered the question. "A bit of both. I suspect. The damage was real enough, but perhaps not as severe as it appeared. The Kuvari are nothing if not thorough in their evaluations." Lucas nodded, satisfied with the answer. "I'm glad you stopped to help, even when you didn't have to." "The best decisions," Brock replied, ruffling his son's hair, "are the ones where doing the right thing and doing the smart thing turn out to be the same thing." As they boarded the interspecies vessel that would carry them to their next assignment, Brock caught sight of Jupiter through the viewport, its swirling storms still raging, but somehow less threatening than before. The red dust that had once symbolized their struggle now seemed more like the backdrop to a new beginning. Sometimes, he reflected, The universe tests us in small ways before revealing its larger purpose. A stranded traveler, a broken ship, a choice to help without expectation of reward. And sometimes, if we're fortunate, those small choices lead to second chances we never dreamed possible. The ship's engines hummed to life, a harmony of human and non-terrestrial technologies working in perfect concert, and they set course for the stars.